Welcome to my channel, where the scariest stories come to life. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into the horror. I used to do a lot of wilderness hiking in real remote, inaccessible locations, and this is the story of the weirdest, most unsettling thing I ever came across. The woods had been quiet that day. I'd been hiking alone for 3 days, and the sense of isolation was starting to feel heavy. The trail was overgrown, with trees pressing in close, and the further I went, the less it felt like a trail at all. I liked the feeling, though. It was the reason I visited places like that in the first place, to feel like I was stepping into a world untouched by anyone else. Around mid-afternoon, I came across what looked like a clearing. And then, as the trees started to thin out, I saw it. It stood in a small clearing, perfectly centered as if someone had placed it there with care, maybe 8 feet tall and made of dark, weathered wood. It wasn't just a piece of wood, though. It was carved. Roughly, but with purpose. Faces were etched into its surface, crude and uneven, some long and narrow, others wide and round. They stacked on top of one another, staring out in all directions. And as I stared at them, I figured out what it was. It was a totem pole. But what caught my attention most were the teeth. The totem was covered in them. Jammed into the wood like little pieces of decoration. At first, I thought they were all animal teeth. There were long curved ones like from a deer, and sharp ones that might have been from a dog or a wolf. But then I saw others, smaller and straighter, ones that looked almost human. They were yellowed and cracked, and some were still rooted in fragments of jawbone. My stomach turned and I stepped back on instinct. I didn't stay long. The thing felt wrong, like all those carved eyes were watching me, and I wanted to forget what I'd seen. But it stayed in my mind as I walked. The forest didn't seem the same after that. The air was heavier, the shadows felt longer and darker, and I decided to cut the day short and set up camp further from the clearing, maybe a mile away. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me sit up. And as much as I told myself it was just animals moving through the underbrush or the wind stirring the trees, I couldn't help feeling like something was out there, watching me. I didn't light a fire. It felt safer to stay in the dark, even though I was freezing. I thought I might not sleep a wink that night, but eventually, exhaustion took over and I drifted off. And I dreamed about teeth. In the morning, I packed up and left as quickly as I could. I didn't go near the clearing again. I didn't even look back. I've done a lot of solo hikes, but that was the first time I felt like I wasn't alone, and I didn't like it. A year later, curiosity got the better of me. The memory of that totem had stuck with me, but I started feeling like maybe I'd been overthinking the whole thing. I started to wonder if I'd imagined parts of it or blown them out of proportion. So I went back. That time, I brought a disposable camera with me, one of those cheap ones that you wind up by hand. I wasn't expecting to find the totem again, but I figured if I did, I'd want proof to send to you. The forest felt different on the second trip. The overgrowth wasn't as dense as I remembered, and the trail was easier to follow, less wild. I reached the clearing by late afternoon, but the totem wasn't there. The spot was empty, just a patch of dirt and grass where it should have been. I walked in circles around the area, looking for signs that it had been moved, but there was nothing. No drag marks, no holes where it might have been anchored. It was as if it had never been there at all. But I know what I saw. The teeth, the carvings, the faces. It wasn't something you'd forget. But there was no trace of it. I took pictures of the clearing anyway, just to prove to myself that I'd gone back. When I got the photos developed, they showed really nothing but trees and grass. No shadows or odd shapes in the background, just an ordinary patch of forest. I stopped telling people about it after that. The few times I tried, I could see it in their faces. The disbelief. The very polite nods. The way their eyes shifted as they looked for a way to change the subject. And I get it. If someone told me a crazy story like that, I'd probably think they were making it up too. But I know what I saw. I know how it felt to stand in front of that thing, and how the air seemed to just sort of hum with something I couldn't explain. I know the fear that kept me awake that night, the sense that something was out there in the dark. And even now, I can't think about it for too long without feeling a chill run down my spine. I haven't been back to that part of the forest since then. I still hike, but I stick to trails that I know, places where other people go. I don't like to be too far from civilization anymore. It's not the wilderness that scares me. It's the things that you can't explain. The things that shouldn't be there, but are. On a freezing December morning in 2001, 3 men climbed into a Soviet-made pickup truck in a rural Georgian village named Lya. It had been a bitter winter, and the cost of keeping warm had skyrocketed. So instead of paying exorbitant prices for coal or gas cylinders, the 3 men came up with a very shrewd, but very illegal, method of heating their homes. They would go off the grid. Their plan was simple. Departing at dawn, they'd drive 30 miles east to a secluded, heavily forested area on the banks of the Eerie River. There, they'd fell trees and chop them into firewood until they were exhausted. But instead of driving back along rough, unlit roads in total darkness, they made the decision to camp out by the river and return home at dawn. It was a practical choice. Driving at night increased the risk of police traffic stops, and if caught with a metric ton of firewood in their truck bed, they'd have a lot of explaining to do. The forest southeast of Lya lies within an area known as the Kalkiti National Park. Famous for its vibrant wetlands, diverse flora and fauna, and some of the oldest hornbeam and oak trees in the region, some more than 1,000 years old, it had earned UNESCO World Heritage status. Logging was strictly illegal. Anyone caught doing it could expect heavy fines or even jail time if the authorities decided to make an example of them. After a long day of cutting trees and hauling logs, the men were exhausted. With clear skies and no forecast of additional snow, they hadn't bothered bringing tents. Instead, they melted a patch of snow with a small fire and slept on thin waterproof ground sheets. Despite having chopped enough logs for an entire winter, they still needed dry tinder and kindling to start a proper campfire. In the snowy, cold rainforests of northern Georgia, that was easier said than done. The men searched for over an hour, walking in every direction and gathering what little dry material they could find. By 6 p.m., they had collected a decent amount, but decided to make one final round, just to be safe. As they walked through the trees, the forest floor before them was carpeted in bright, ethereal white from frost and fresh snow. They talked and laughed, their breath steaming in the cold air, when suddenly they spotted something strange. Ahead of them, a patch of forest floor, about a meter in diameter and almost perfectly circular, was completely devoid of snow, as if something had been resting there through the recent snowfall. They were transfixed. As they approached, they noticed something even more unusual. Steam was rising from the center of the bare patch of earth. Lying in the middle were 2 small metal cylinders. One of the men reached down and picked one up, only to drop it immediately with a surprised laugh. "It's heavy," he said, "and it's warm." They couldn't agree on what the objects were, but they all assumed they were valuable. Maybe they were batteries, powerful ones, still holding a charge, likely from expensive or specialized equipment. Whoever had lost them might pay to get them back, and if not, someone else surely would. And in the meantime, they could help keep the men warm through the night. They stashed one of the cylinders behind a rock in the woods and brought the other back to camp. After dinner and some vodka, the men lay down to rest beneath a canopy of stars. But soon, they began to feel nauseous. They tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Eventually, all 3 realized they were experiencing the same symptoms. Initially, they blamed the vodka. Cheap vodka, if improperly filtered, can contain fuel oils or even methanol, which can cause vomiting, headaches, and worse. It wouldn't have been the first time it made them sick. But even after emptying their stomachs, the nausea didn't stop. They vomited until bile stained the snow a sickly yellow. The symptoms lasted for hours. By early morning, feeling weak and unusually exhausted, they decided to load what they could into the truck and return later for the rest. Back in Laya, their families greeted them warmly, relieved the firewood would help them through the harsh winter. The men were teased for drinking too much, but they insisted they hadn't. Their claims were dismissed with laughter. If not vodka, then what else could explain their condition? What they'd discover later would horrify them. After returning, the men collapsed into bed and slept through most of the day. That evening, one of them woke up with violent diarrhea, bloody diarrhea. Urged by his wife, he saw the village doctor the next morning. But fearing exposure of his illegal activities and not wanting to lose the strange, potentially valuable find, he kept the incident with the metal cylinder to himself. Without the full story, the doctor assumed it was a severe allergic reaction and gave the man a powerful antihistamine. Miraculously, his condition improved within hours. But so did his companions, even though they hadn't received any medication. Grateful to be feeling better, they carried on with life as usual. But about a week later, new symptoms appeared, worse ones. At work, one man complained of pain on his back. When a coworker lifted his shirt to check, he was shocked to see painful blisters running along his spine, surrounded by red, swollen flesh, like severe burns. Afraid of being caught for illegal logging, the men waited 3 more weeks before seeking help at a hospital in the nearby city of Zugdidi. By then, they could barely stand. Still hesitant, they initially didn't mention the metal cylinders. Only after doctors stressed that withholding information could cost them their lives did they confess everything. From that point, the diagnosis was clear: advanced and severe radiation poisoning. Zugdidi General Hospital was ill-equipped for such a case, so the men were airlifted to the emergency medical center in Tbilisi. There, they were isolated, washed down to remove contamination, and transferred to the Institute of Hematology and Transfusion. Doctors found necrotic black tissue in the open sores on their backs. They were given antivirals, antibiotics, blood transfusions, and treatments for their skin. Once stabilized, the men described exactly where they had found the objects. Soldiers were sent to Kalkidi Forest, and using the men's detailed directions, they quickly located the cylinders. Wearing radiation suits and using robots, the soldiers placed them in specially designed containers to prevent further radiation leakage. The cylinders were taken to a secure facility and examined by the International Atomic Energy Agency. Within 24 hours, they were identified as strontium-90, a radioactive isotope used in radioisotope thermoelectric generators or RTGs. These generators convert heat from radioactive decay into electricity and are used to power remote equipment, like satellites, weather stations, or relay towers. Years earlier, during the construction of the nearby hydroelectric station, RTGs had been installed to power remote relay stations in the area. But over time, some had gone missing, left in forests like forgotten relics. And the 3 men had found one. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying tale. See you in the next one.